Everyone, welcome to the Way Champions podcast today. This is John. Jerry's going to be joining me here, and we have an amazing podcast for you this morning with our wonderful friend, Anson Dorrance. Now, Anson just retired in the past summer, August of 2024, as the University of North Carolina women's head soccer coach. It was kind of a last second announcement to the world right before the season started, and we're recording this right before the NCAA tournament is starting. And after many years at the helm from 1979 to 2024, where he won over 1,100 games, he won 21 of the current 41 NCAA championships. He was also the head coach of the U.S. national team, winning the first World Cup in 1991. Published three books. I mean, seven-time NCAA Women's Coach of the Year, one-time Men's Coach of the Year, because he used to coach the men there as well. 12-time ACC Coach of the Year. Just one of the most successful coaches in any sport. A guy who Dean Smith, the legendary men's basketball coach at Carolina, once said, "Hey, this is a women's soccer school. We're all just trying to keep up." And so, what Jerry and I want to explore with Anson today is retirement. What does that feel like? What does that look like? What made you do that? How do you have the self-awareness to look at yourself and say, okay, it's time after decades and decades that I don't have the energy or the passion and what's changed to do this anymore? And so much more. So it's going to be a wonderful conversation. You're going to want to buckle in for this one. Before we start, again, just thank you to all of you who have put in some orders now, getting ready for the holidays of bulk book sales. So, as you know, we have a new book, The Champion Sports Parent, and we've had so many teams who have had all their athletes read The Champion Teammate, and now they're like, we need to bring the parents into this. So you can reach out for that. The Champion Teammate, which is a year and a half out now. And just even this fall, as fall sports season coming to an end, the amount of programs that have sent us stuff, sent us pictures here at the end of the season, another state final, another state championship, another run, another best season ever on the college level, on the youth level, and so much more. Even middle schoolers texting their coaches and saying, "Coach, I reread that chapter in the book and that made so much sense." So if you want to do bulk orders, just John at changingthegameproject.com. Email me. We'll give you a nice discount on the books. And of course, on Amazon and everything like that, you can go find the book for single copies or orders less than 10. Okay. And then thanks to our friends at Sprocket Sports as well. These guys are amazing. Sprocketsports.com/CTG. You want a website, you want the best registration system, you want a club communication system, all under one platform with the best customer service I've ever been involved with. Check them out, sprocketsports.com, and tell them that you heard about them on the Way Champions podcast. All right. But for now, get ready, get set. It's Jerry, it's John, and it's legendary coach Anson Dorrance. Enjoy, everybody.
Here I am.
Anson, welcome back to the Way Champions podcast. Jerry and I are so excited to have you back on for numerous times between supporting our conferences and being a guest on this podcast and just wonderful conversations. It's just great to see your face again.
Well, you're very kind. And I've appreciated the contributions that you guys have made towards my construction as a coach and my program. So trust me, the exchange is mutual, and I've always enjoyed it.
Will it always feel like your program?
I think it will. I mean, the national team still feels like my program, and I left 1994. So I'm sure the program is going to feel the same for me.
So you wake up in the morning and you put your Carolina soccer shirt on every day, right? Look at you. You're sitting there with this Carolina soccer. What's happening here?
Well, yeah. I mean, so when I stepped back, it was during our preseason, And of course, Damon, who became the interim coach and is my choice for the head coach, I didn't have a chance to hire sort of a fourth coach. So basically, I'm still going to practice every day. I don't travel with a team. I don't sit with the team, but I certainly, for home games, sit in the stands. And obviously, every game the kids are playing in, I'm watching it on TV. And I saw the ACC final because the league, the ACC, gave me an award at halftime, so I attended that game. But basically, yeah, I'm still plugged in. I'm not doing much. I sort of wander around in practice, chatting with an occasional player. So I have nothing to do with the practice structure or what's going on. But I still want to support Damon and Tracy Bates-Leone, a former player of mine that we brought in as an assistant, and Chris Ducar, the goalkeeper coach. So I still support them, and I go to practice. I love the kids. Obviously, all these kids are young women that I recruited, and I'm enjoying connecting with them every day, but also celebrating just this wonderful season that they're having. And they shouldn't be having this kind of season. I mean, the team a year ago sent 11 kids into first division pro teams, and 9 kids jump into the transfer portal. So we lost 20 kids, and yet as of the post Florida State loss in the ACC final, we were number 2 in the RPI, and it still boggles my mind how we could be number 2 in the RPI and not finish with a number 1 seed, but we're a number 2 seed. And obviously, maybe someone's memoirs will explain to me how you can be number 2 in the RPI, which is indicating you've played a remarkable schedule and done well with it, and not been number 1 in the as a team in the NCAA tournament. So that has me flummoxed. But I'm very proud of everything that's going on, and I'm certainly enjoying life.
Yeah, it's amazing. I am probably more connected to the staff that took over than Jerry is. I think I've told you this before. Damon and my brother were teammates growing up, and I had a coaching job in Raleigh, North Carolina, and my first assistant coach there was Damon. So right after he graduated from NC State, and then I also had the honor of working with Tracy in her last year at Colby with her team there. And it was just cool to see the work that we did there. That this year, that's an NCAA tournament team, and that was the team that hadn't won a conference game in 6 years. And so you've left it in great hands. I don't know Chris as well, but I know he's been there with you forever. And so but I mean, I think there's a great role to like wandering the sidelines and talking to players. I mean, I think that's what Alex Ferguson did a lot at the end of his career as well. Like he wasn't running training, he wasn't setting up training. He was managing and connecting with people.
No, that's a great observation. And honestly, I'm probably chatting more with the kids that are fighting to get on the field than the kids that are playing maximum minutes. Those kids, obviously, if they have a remarkable game, I'm giving them a fist bump or something. But it's the kids that are trying to fight their way onto the field that I probably have a greater connection with, because they're the ones that need more support. Because the kids that are playing obviously can see from their performances, winning or losing games or impacting and not impacting what's going on. But the kids that don't really have a chance to get on the field, I think they're the ones that need to know, you know what, you've got huge potential. And here's what you can do if you want to fight your way into the field, but also what you can do to improve yourself.
Wow.
So I'm wandering around, talking about the process and about what they can do to get to the next level. And what was really cool yesterday, we had this wonderful kid that I didn't really expect to get on the field until her junior year that's actually played a lot of minutes for us this year that hasn't played in the last 2 games. And she had a phenomenal practice yesterday. Her name is Ashley Penny. She's a kid from Florida, and she just lit it up. I mean, she was also making a statement of, yes, you need to play me. And then what I really liked about what Damon did at the end of practice, he got the whole team together and basically said the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're making a case for yourself to get on the field based on your attitude and your competitive fire and everything you did today in training. So it was just a really good day. But those are the kids I'm speaking to most, the kids that are fighting their way onto the field, and kids coming back from injury, the kids that have another level, and they're trying to get there, and you're trying to give them insights on how to get there. So that's more or less what I'm doing. But please don't compare me to Ferguson. I mean, his shadow was huge, and I have stepped back so far. This team is Damon and Tracy's and Chris's, and all the successes they've had this season are at their feet, and they've done just an absolutely remarkable job.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry,
Wow.
before you jump in, I just want to I want to say like that role that you have there though, I mean, because like you said, you recruited those kids, right? Those are the families that you made this promise to that I'll look after your daughter, right? And you as in your role now, you get to do that a lot more, which is a really interesting and vitally important role. And, maybe this kid that you were just talking about, without that type of support, doesn't earn as many minutes, right? But they're like, it's such I think such an important thing that coaching staffs don't think about, because especially during the season, you got your 14 kids, 16 kids who play a lot of minutes, right? Who play the majority of minutes, and that's who you're a lot of times pouring into. But when you take the time to recognize those other kids, the other up to 28 or whatever is on the roster, then you see what you saw that made you recruit them in the first place. Because it's probably the first time they've ever been player 22 on a team.
No, you're right. I mean, obviously, a lot of what all of us do at every level of coaching is roster management. And if you want to have an extraordinary culture, you've got to support the kid that doesn't play with the same affection and respect to the kid that's scoring goal after goal after goal for you. So you're absolutely spot on.
Yeah. Jerry.
Gosh, I gotta jump in here because I am just in awe of, I mean, I'm seeing passion, enthusiasm, excitement, joy. Uh, Anson, I mean, why retire? How did you reach this decision? I mean, you seem like you're about 20 years ago, when I first met you.
Well, first of all, Jerry, you're very kind. But honestly, yeah, I am exhausted. 47 years and 13 of those years coaching two teams, but also maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of those years coaching three teams, because there was a stretch from basically 86 to 94 where I was also coaching the U.S. Women's full national team. So that's that's tiring. So I stepped back because I just didn't think I could just commit myself with the same amount of time and energy that I've had in the past. And I think the kids deserve someone that's fully committed, that's investing themselves in every aspect that they can. And I just didn't think that I could do that anymore. So it was basically it was energy. And yeah, I had a good night's sleep last night, Jerry. So I've got some pep this morning. But it's also because that every single weekend I'm not spending time entertaining recruits and their families. I'm not.
Interesting. Yeah.
And even though right now the email is still taking me forever to clear, hopefully that'll slowly dissipate. But I look at my phone at the end of the week, and Jerry, you'd understand this completely. It takes me 4.5 hours a day to basically get off my phone. Hopefully, eventually, that'll drop down to maybe 30 to 40 minutes a day. But I want that time back, and I want it back as fast as possible. And it's not coming back yet, but I think eventually it will.
Yeah. It's interesting because you've always had that energy, but now that you're away from the game, so to speak, you're still part of it, but now that you're away, you're getting more sleep. There's less worry, there's less tension, there's less anxiety. And all of those things, John, you would admit to this as well. I don't realize till I get a vacation that I can't believe how much more energy I have. I think I have energy, but I really don't. And so pulling back is really an interesting awakening for yourself, I'm sure.
Well, Jerry, I got to share this with you. My wife organized a great trip to Italy for us for our 50th wedding anniversary this past summer. And not this is going to surprise you what I'm about to say. But basically, I used to hate vacations. In fact, the maximum amount I would commit to a vacation is 1 week at the beach with my family And at first, I was just so anxious the whole vacation because what's going through my mind is someone is getting ahead of me. Someone is out recruiting me, someone's, out working me, someone's, basically getting ahead of me. So I went on vacations with huge trepidation. And all of a sudden, I'm in Portugal and Italy for 2 weeks. And it's the first time I'd taken 2 weeks off in a row in my life. And honestly, I kind of liked it. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, maybe there's another, quality of life that I can experience by not being, working 24/7. So for me, that was sort of eye opening. And then, of course, what my wife says all the time, and she's absolutely correct, because everyone thinks I've got all kinds of freedom right now, everyone's jumping in. And of course, now the days are still filling up with events like this. Not that I begrudge it at all, but a lot of other things. And so for me, a lot of things are still filling into the holes that were open to me by me stepping back from being the head coach at the University of North Carolina. Doesn't mean I'm not enjoying some of these projects, but basically it's really amazing how your time still fills up, even in the most aggressive way, even after you retire. And that's certainly my case, because you're right, Jerry. I'm not leaving the game. I love the game. I love the people in the game. I love the opportunities that we have to continue to improve the game and impact on the people in the game. So for me, I've stepped back from coaching, but I haven't stepped back from being a part of the culture of player development in the world.
Was it on that vacation when, I mean, I think there was an email that I saw back and forth between you and Jerry, and was it during that time when you just said, I don't think I have the time, the energy to start another season? Like what was the moment or the feeling that you said, yeah, this isn't going to work?
No, there wasn't really a moment. What there was is I obviously wanted to leave the program in good shape. And so we were taken out by BYU in the quarterfinals, and the team was a really good team. The previous team was within 16 seconds and a blind referee from winning the national championship. So that team returned almost intact.
Yeah.
In addition to like 9 starters returning from that team, we also had 2 All-Americans returning to the lineup that were injured, in Macy Bell and Sam Meza. So on paper, that was just an absolutely remarkable team. And yep, I mean, you could sort of spin it if you look at the statistics about what a great year we had. Like we were undefeated in the regular season last fall, but there were like 8 ties or something. And of course, part of the reason was the NCAA had decided there was no overtime anymore.
Right.
And so I was used to, playing a deep roster and then winning in overtime.
Yeah, wearing teams down. Yeah.
Wear teams down and then defeat them in overtime. In overtime. But now the overtime was gone. So now at the end of regulation, it was tied. It stayed a tie. So what we saw most of that year was teams bunkering back, even elite teams, even teams, ranked in the top 5 in the country. They would play us in a bunker and counter platform, basically fighting. And so I learned a lot that year. But I also felt really bad at the end of the year because in the quarterfinal game against BYU in Provo, we were winning 3-0 at the half.
Yeah.
Ended up losing that game 4-3.
Yeah.
I don't really think I made a good decision in that game at all. I didn't make a good decision in my roster rotation, maybe even in my starting lineup. And I felt just really guilty about this wonderful collection of players. As I said earlier, 11 of whom signed first division pro contracts. I just didn't think I did a very good job managing them. So I was excited to come back and rectify what I thought was just really miserable decisions that I made the previous fall. And then what ended up happening is there's a new women's professional league in the United States. It's called the Super League. And we scheduled a team in the Super League in our preseason. And also, this is the first game we played post BYU.
Mm-hmm.
We beat this pro team, and a lot of the kids on the field for the pro team were elite players from elite programs. I mean, this was a good team. We beat them 5-1.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, oh my gosh. I think we're going to be okay. Then I felt confident enough to step back, and then I did. Uh, and it was obviously in our preseason, but I felt pretty confident that we had the tools to still compete at a pretty high level. And then we've still overachieved, though. No way a very thin roster. I mean, there's some talent on that roster, but a very thin roster should have finished, second in the RPI, which is where we are right now. There is no way. But I think Damon and Tracy and Chris have just done a wonderful job coaching this team. So I still feel very good about my decision. I feel really good about not being stressed out of my mind, every single minute of every day about recruits I'm losing or games I'm losing or the fact that it happened again. I mean, we're number 2 in the RPI. We're a number 2 seed. How is that possible?
Mm-hmm.
How is a team that's number 2 in the RPI ended up a number 2 seed? I can't wait for someone's explanation. Because basically, I think, some people that obviously aren't really fans of the University of North Carolina women's soccer team have put their thumb on the scale. Someone has to prove, otherwise to me, the logic of why a team with our schedule, and we played so many teams in the top 5, how a team that plays our schedule wouldn't be a number 1 seed. And so I'm still a little bit discouraged about the politics of the game. But I'm incredibly proud of our coaches and kids. Excuse me.
Yeah. I mean,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Jeff.
Jerry, I was going to bring up, I mean, Anson, you bring up so many things. There was 2 things there. And I know Jerry had a team he worked with last spring that had a similar situation where they didn't get a bid when they were higher in the RPI, beat that team head to head, had like 6 more wins and didn't get a bid and I don't know if Jerry you want to touch on that, but I was just thinking when Anson was talking about the BYU game last year, Anson, 6 weeks ago we had one of your former UNC colleagues, Roy Williams, on the podcast, and Roy was talking about how kind of what made him retire. He said in all his years of coaching, there was like there was like no games where when he went back he said I screwed up. And he said in his last season, and I'm going to misquote him a bit, but that there was like 3 where he's like, I didn't make the right sub, the right call at the right time. That was on me. And he's like, maybe it's time. And that was his self-awareness of, for 30 something years, more than that, right? I could go to bed at night knowing I did everything as a coach to help. And it's interesting that you had that sort of moment after the BYU game of like, I didn't help my team in that moment. And obviously soccer is a funny game and weird stuff happens, but I just found that interesting that both of you, after a really long career, had a moment where like felt I let my team down in that moment.
Yeah, and I think knowing Roy the way I do, and just having this huge affection and respect for him, I could see him saying that. Because the last thing any of us should be doing in the coaching profession is not taking responsibility. And throughout my career, whenever we lost, what I'm reviewing in my mind is, well, maybe I didn't have a good enough taper. Yeah, our legs looked a little heavy. Maybe my practices were too long. Maybe I ran them too hard. Maybe my substitution pattern wasn't deep enough, so I wore out my warriors, my starting team. And so, yeah, I think maybe I've been, seeped in the Dean Smith school of, taking personal responsibility, which is the same way that Roy Williams was raised and trained as a coach. So I think that's our instinct. Our instinct is to take responsibility, to not hide from it, and to take as much pressure as you can off the players that you've coached, which I think is classic Dean Smith, Roy Williams, UNC
John Wooden.
Yeah, John Wooden. I mean, so I think any coach that is not afraid of admitting responsibility, and I think most of us aspire to be in that school. I think that's consistent. I'm glad you shared that with me because I felt the same way. I thought I could have done a better job with a great team than the job I did.
Okay, this raises up. There's so many issues here, and we need a few hours to do this. And like I'm frustrated because you have made some good points, John. Excuse me, you as well. Look, it brings up this idea of coaches who have self-awareness. It's such an important topic. It's so overlooked. So many coaches don't develop this. John and I, Anson, were developing a mastermind and certification program for Way of Champions. And a huge part of that program for coaches is going to be, we're going to spend a lot of time. We're going to take a deep dive emotionally, mentally, psychologically, spiritually into their hearts and souls and find out, like who are they? Do you know who you are? And do you understand that these decisions that you make come from inside and to develop that sense of self-awareness? If I may digress a bit here, it was Sun Tzu, and you'll appreciate this, Anson. You're a student of philosophy and a lifelong learner. But Sun Tzu, in his classic book, The Art of War, and I quote, at least paraphrase, he mentions that to be a good leader, it's important to know your team. He said, but to be a great leader, you must know your opponent. And then he goes on to say, but to be an extraordinary leader, you must know yourself. What are your thoughts on this idea? Because with this idea of self-awareness and knowing oneself, because you obviously, Roy, John Wooden, Dean Smith, these are coaches who, Cara Vanderveer, who just recently retired, these are coaches who really have a sense of self. They know when to make the right decision at the right time because they know that they're willing to be vulnerable. They're willing to say, I no longer can do this, or I'm not the right person for this right now. I don't have the energy. That takes an enormous amount of self-awareness. And I'm just wondering if you would, for our listeners, just sort of share your thoughts on this and maybe help us unpack what that might mean for all of us.
Well, first of all, I really appreciate you sharing that with me on the podcast, those three stages from the Art of War, because you sent them to me before this podcast, and I really liked reading them. And I think all of us should, be seeped in those three different levels. And let me share this. This is from a different perspective, but it's going to say the same thing in a different way. I had a privilege of teaching a class at UNC for the last 2 springs. I was a part of a team of 3 professors that rotated through a series of lectures in the spring. And the course we were teaching was the art and science of expertise. One of the lectures I was given was a lecture on self-awareness. And I started the lecture very simply. So it was a class of 300 to 325 kids. And the kids come into class, and this is the first question I asked them. Are you self-aware? Answer yes or no. And of course, they've got their phones and they're punching a code into their phones. And then, of course, what's happening because of technology on the screen at the front of the room, you can see this long line of the people that said yes, and the incredibly short line of the people that said no. In other words, are you self-aware? So the yes line, yes, I am self-aware, was the 2 semesters between 85 and 90% of the class was self-aware, according to the people in the class. And that obviously was a great springboard for the lecture. And I said, I want you to know that according to all the research, only 15% of you are self-aware. And then, of course, the lecture began because most of us are not self-aware. And so what I talk about in this is I talk about when anyone asks me anything about my program and the cornerstones of our success. And it's sort of interesting we're talking about this right now because I was on a call with a professional organization in Philadelphia that's bidding to get an NWSL team there. And they were asking me because they were trying to vet me. They didn't know anything about me because they come from the business world. And now they're trying to enter the women's soccer world. So a woman on the call said, well, Coach, what is the secret sauce? What do you attribute your success at UNC to? And what I did is it's a boiler point question that I'm asked on a regular basis. So I was well rehearsed on how to answer it. And I will abbreviate it for you. So the first principle that I think has made all the difference for me is the competitive cauldron. And obviously, you and I have discussed this before, and I think that's been a very important part of my success, the U.S. women's national team success that I was a part of in the late 80s, early 90s. And then the second most important thing is your core values, whether or not you have principle-centered leadership yourself and whether or not your kids have a principle center. But the third piece gets right to what you're talking about, Jerry. The third piece, and I think the most difficult part of coaching for me, is to try to get everyone's personal narrative on your roster to the truth as fast as possible. Because unless your personal narrative is the truth, you're not going to be in a position to change anything. And the interesting dilemma we're all in right now is because of the self-esteem movement, most of the kids that are being brought in that we're coaching now at all levels in college have an inflated sense of their worth. And why do they have an inflated sense of their worth? Because the self-esteem movement was this psychological movement that was telling parents that, let's build up the self-esteem of our kids. So how do we do that? Well, we praise them at every opportunity. It's the sort of everyone gets a trophy philosophy of life.
Even if you're 0-10, you'll get a trophy.
Yes, exactly right. It's a participation trophy. And you know what? That's good enough because you're still circulating blood and that's worth celebrating, whatever.
But it's more than that, right? It's also you lost your starting spot. Let's just jump to a new team, right? Like it all goes together, right? Oh, you're not on the elite team. Let's just change the name of our team to the elite team, and then you're on the elite team, and everyone's on the elite team, and everyone's in the elite league.
John, you're spot on. You're exactly right. So here's the issue. The issue is everyone's personal narrative is designed to protect them from pain and accountability. So your narrative is laced with excuses for why you're not starting, why you're not playing maximum minutes. And here's what's really interesting. This movement is crippling our kids because there are two problems with it. The first problem is obviously you have delusions of grandeur. But the second problem is you don't have any standards and you have no respect for authority. Why don't you have any respect for authority? Because your authority figures have been feeding you this BS all of your life. And who are the authority figures in your life? It's your mom and your dad. And all of a sudden now you're in college. And now for the first time in your life, someone is telling you the truth about who you are, what you're doing, and it's just catastrophic for them. I got to share this. This is hilarious. So every 5 years, our athletic department brings in the preeminent sociologist on campus to lecture to us on who we're recruiting and what our kids are like. We had one come in 2012. And I don't even have to tell you the entire lecture. I'm going to tell you his first slide, and you're going to understand fully what the lecture was about. So this is his first slide. The date on the first slide is 1969. I love that year. That was my high school graduation year. So underneath 1969, this kid has just gotten all F's on his report card, and he's returned home to show his parents all his F's on his report card. And what's happening in the picture? The parents are screaming at the kids. Then the year is shifted to when this gentleman was giving the lecture. It is shifted to 2012. The kid has all F's on his report card. And now you see in this picture, the parents are screaming at the teacher. So if a kid isn't starting for me, it's not their fault. It's my fault. And you're right. Then what do? They jump in the transfer portal because clearly, I am visionless to not play their kid maximum minutes. And so this is getting to exactly what you're talking about. John and Jerry, you're talking about basically self-awareness. These kids aren't self-aware.
I mean, Anson, that's exactly it. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of the psychologist Jonathan Haidt, but he just had this new book out, and he talks about the two differences in kids, much like your sociology professor is talking about. And he says, up until 2012, 13 with the smartphone, our children were raised in a play-based environment. Now they're raised in a phone-based environment where those influencers are not just mom and dad, but also someone on TikTok who's telling them that their coach is a jerk, right? And then number two, um, that we've overprotected our kids in the real world and underprotected them in the online world, right? So all this bad online influence comes in, and then in the real world, where a person that I can vet, like their soccer coach or like their history teacher, is tough on them, we intervene and we get in the way, and then we turn them over to their phones, and boom, you know, who knows who's telling them that their parents are full of crap and their coach is full of crap, and you know they're the best thing ever.
No, absolutely. Now, obviously, I don't have that sort of media savvy to know what he's talking about, but that makes sense to me. I mean, whatever the rationale is for why this is such a challenge now, um, I am seeing the challenge. But here's what's really cool. And this is where, you know, John, you and Jerry can have such a huge impact on the development of the different cultures. I mean, what I find is a great antidote to this is to figure out a way to lead effectively. And the way you do that is to, first of all, win trust. And when you win trust, all of a sudden, the player that you have basically won trust from now believes that you are interested in helping them become their best selves. That's the most critical door for you to be able to walk through to help a young athlete or a young person that you're leading, is for them to know that everything you're doing is for them. There's nothing transactional for you in what you're doing to help shape them. This is to help them. So once you've won their trust, now you can start to reconstruct their personal narrative. And this is where there's a great book by Sir John Whitmore, which I would recommend both of you guys read. I think the title of the book is Coaching for Performance. And he's got this grow mnemonic. And the grow mnemonic is the G starts for goals, the R starts for reality, the O starts for options, and the W starts basically is for will you do it? And what's interesting about the goals is all of us know that coach, yeah, the goals are basically a direction. It's not so important to have as much a goal as a direction. I want to get better, or I want to, you know, start, or, and then that's a good enough goal. The most critical elements of the mnemonic are actually the R, the reality. So what all of us have to have the ability to do is to get someone to the reality. And so in this conversation we're having right now, it's getting their personal narrative to the truth. And so you've got to figure out a way that the players can trust, that can help them get to the reality as fast as possible. We have 10 different things that we talk about at UNC in a player conference that gets them to the reality. And then once they realize, yep, this is who I am, and they've embraced it, and they basically fully understand that this is exactly who they are. Now you talk about options to change their place. If they're a non-starter, here's what you can do to start. So now the options are basically your process. And then, of course, the final thing, the will you do it thing, is so critical, because even though everyone will agree that, yep, this is what I should be doing, there aren't that many people that actually do it. They're not that hardworking. They're not that committed. This isn't that important to them. There are 1,000 different reasons why you don't end up doing basically the things you have to do to become the extraordinary person you'd like to pretend that you're trying to be. And so this mnemonic, the grow mnemonic from this book, I think is extraordinary. And then I think what all of us have to do is to construct a platform to help the player be fully into understanding who they are. So it gets back to what you were saying earlier, Jerry, which I really, really like. So this is a subset of the three things. And in a way, you are helping the athlete get to the highest level in the art of war, which is self-understanding. And so you're helping them through that three-step process. And I think the better and a more effective and more trustworthy leader you are, the more elite athletes you can sort of get to that third level, and then you're going to continue to help them improve.
So what is the role? Well said. I love the way you're saying that. What is the role of an athlete's peers in terms of determining that truth? It seems to me that that's a really important piece because you as the coach can tell them what the truth is, but they're going to come back and say, that's not what my parents are telling me. That's not what my friends are telling me. You know, if indeed this is going to take place, don't we have to use our resources like fellow players or, teammates?
Yes. And this is where there's often a disconnect because the players that don't really understand this process are trying to show their teammates that they love them. So the dilemma is the player is caught up in the, I want to let this know how much I love and support them. So then they get into the same hole the parents dig for the people they love, which is to have an expression of love that's compromising the truth. So, and I'll give you a typical soccer example. So you've got this kid that everyone on the team loves, and all of a sudden this kid gets to the top of the 18 and shoots the ball over the bar. And here's what the entire team yells. Yeah, great job, Mary. Well done, Mary. Great stuff. What are they doing? They're just saying, Mary, I love you. I care about you, sort of nice try. What are they really saying? They're saying, it doesn't matter what you do. We're going to love you anyway. But you know what? No. What the leader on the team should say, what the F are you doing, Mary? You got to hit the frame. If you can't hit the frame, play the ball to someone that can organize an opportunity for us to hit the frame, because that was an absolute waste. So this is the disconnect, because what the athletes on the roster are trying to share is, I love you, I care about you, and I fully support you. That's the wrong time.
Yeah. It requires some really genuine truth coming from the players. So to me, in order to do that, because I've worked a lot with females, and females are really big on the love piece. And in order to get a person to tell you, you know what, you were effing wrong in taking that shot. You should, what we have to do, I guess, is find some kind of objective way, because I can't argue with the result of my mile time. I didn't qualify. The qualifying time was, 4:09, and I ran 4:10. Therefore, it's not. So, is there some kind of objective way where these kids can learn the truth and say, you know what? Yeah, you know what? It's not a question about love. It's a question about, I just didn't do A, B, and C, or I'm not passing the test on this particular level. Is that so?
Yes, that is the biggest hurdle for leadership on these teams. They're so afraid of what people are going to think of them. They would rather be popular than be respected as a leader. And so what a lot of the young women will choose is they will choose popularity and being embraced over being an effective leader. Because we have a young lady right now that's emerging. I love watching her evolution. This is a kid that came off the bench her freshman and sophomore years. And since, as I mentioned before, we sent 11 kids in the pro league and 9 into the transfer portal, this kid was on the field. She's having a breakout season. She's our leading scorer. She's one of the leading scorers in the country. And what's happening now, because I saw this recently in a competition where she was the leader of her team, when her team was beaten by this other team in practice, I saw her basically get her team together, and she just lit everyone up and basically said, yeah, we got to do better. We got to do this. We got to do that. And we're going to win this next game. And she was just extraordinary. And everything she was saying in that huddle were the right things. She didn't give herself a break. I didn't do enough. We didn't do enough. We got to do this. We got to do that. And she sort of reset the table. And then what I loved is her team, them playing against a team that had just beaten them, ended up winning the next game. So that capturing that quality is incredibly rare and difficult. And I think a lot of it is because, well, I got to share this with you, Jerry. I'm sorry for this tack, but when you when you hear the rest of this talk, I think you'll understand why I'm making it. This course that I'm teaching, the Art and Science of Expertise, there's another lecturer by the name of Jeff Green. He's absolutely brilliant. I mean, my IQ is probably 1/4 of his. So this guy's just got a huge brain. And I don't believe you can actually teach leadership. So I joke about this all the time. Of course, I'm at the leadership conferences all the time. And I will certainly go in, but I tell the people, I said, if anyone in the room asks me if I can teach leadership, I'm going to say no. So please know I'm going to cash your check, to come into this leadership conference, but I just don't think you can teach leadership. This guy thinks you can teach leadership. So at the beginning of the semester, we have a debate in class about whether or not you can teach leadership. We're doing this for all kinds of reasons, but one of the main reasons is because in this toxic environment of tribalism, we wanted to show that people that absolutely disagreed on an element could still be civil with each other and have a conversation and make a point about all this. I now actually think you can teach leadership because of a book I read by Brene Brown, because it solved the leadership dilemma for me in leading female teams. And even the title of her book explains how she teaches leadership. And the title of that book is Dare to Lead.
Right.
Because the problem...
Brilliant book.
It is. It's absolutely brilliant. And she got to the core of the biggest problem we have in constructing verbal leadership in women's athletics. Because what they're afraid of is they're afraid of saying something, alienating all of their teammates, and being excoriated. And this brilliant woman in this brilliant book talks about having the courage to lead. And I think that's the key. So for me, that's just a critical piece. And I'd love for all of us to figure out a way to help all the people that we're leading to get there, because you're right. I can say something in practice and it's not going to resonate to the same extent if a player is saying it on the field during the game to her teammates. So, Jerry, you're spot on.
Yeah. I mean, Jerry, I just have to jump in here, like a short story, and then to build on what you're saying, Anson. One of the teams that I worked with this fall, last year we were top 5 in the RPI, one of the top seeds in a different sport, not soccer. And we had one of the best players in the country. And she was like the woman you just described. Like the standard was so high because she was so competitive. No one wanted to upset her. She didn't care. She didn't care if you didn't like her because the pass went under your stick. She didn't care, right? And she was one of the finalists for National Player of the Year. Now this year we brought back almost the entire team, but she finished. She graduated. She turned pro. So she basically went. She's a field hockey player. Went to the best field hockey league in the world as a starter right out of college. It'd be like going to the English Premier League in soccer, right? Like huge jump. And that's how good she was. But the standard was so high because you didn't want to piss her off, right? And this year we had talented players, but we were missing that. And we kind of got it going at the end of the year when we realized that, who was going to have to replace her was the coaches. They were going to be the ones because she was gone. And I think hate would be way too strong a word. They didn't hate her. They grudgingly respected her. And this year they realized how much they missed her. But because of that. And so I tell that story to match with yours, to go around this idea about reality, this idea about, to use your words, gets everyone's personal narrative to the truth. This should be the first team meeting that every college team does every single year, or a high school team every year. And we don't. We talk about the tactics and our system of play and what we're going to do. This should be the deep work with, do you think you have self-awareness? Okay, what's the next question? Do you think you have the ability right now to start for this team? And when 25 people put yes, we've got a big problem. You know, like this seems to be where everyone should start, but they don't. They only get here when they have lots of issues in October.
That's so good. Well, let me jump in. This will be another anecdote, but I think you'll appreciate it and enjoy it. So we've got the 10 things we talk about in the player conference: self-discipline, competitive fire, self-belief, love of the ball, love of playing the love of. All right, I've got to jump off. This is the guy, but I'll be right back on. So basically, here's what I love about our player conferences. We've got these, 10 different things that we're going to analyze. And the player sitting across from me in the conference has to decide where she is on a 5-point scale. So the self-discipline piece, for example. So self-discipline, competitive fire, self-belief, love of the ball, love of playing the game, love of watching the game, energizing, coachability, athleticism. We've got all these things that she has to analyze for herself. And this is a part of the process of getting someone's personal narrative to the truth. A part of that exercise is to ask them, okay, what is your self-discipline? The 5-point scale is, if she gives herself a 5, she thinks she has the self-discipline to already be on the Olympic team and the national full team. If she gives herself a 4.5, the statement she's making is that she could already be a professional in this category. If she gives herself a 4, that means she's a UNC starter in this category. If she gives herself a 3.5, she's on the travel roster in this category. If she gives herself a 3, a 2.5 or lower, then obviously she's not on the travel roster. Or actually 3.5 is gets to play in every half. 3 is makes the travel roster, et cetera, et cetera. Mm. So we sit down with all these freshmen, and here's a quiz for both of you. I asked them, where are you in self-discipline? Every single freshman says the same thing. On a 5-point scale, what do they say? Are they Olympic caliber? Are they professional caliber? Are they UNC starter caliber? Are they a kid who plays in every half? Are they a kid who plays, basically makes the travel roster? What does every one of them say? What's their number?
I mean, my guess would be between 4 and 5, because they've never really seen what self-discipline is before.
And they've been taught a whole bag of goods that they're ready to go bananas right away, and that's why they're in Carolina. So I'd say agree with John, 4 to 5.
Yeah, they do. None of them say anything above 4.
Above 4?
They don't go above 4. There's no way any of these kids think they should already be on the U.S. full team or sign a professional contract, because if they did, they would already have signed a pro contract. Yeah. No one offered him a pro contract, so they all say 4. Mm-hmm. The next question is really interesting. Then I say, well, our standard for the beep is every kid has to come in and hit a 40 on the beep. Mm-hmm. That's a fitness test. It's not a test of talent. It's a test of, did you do the work in the summer? So then I say, all right, you think you should get a 4. What'd you get on the beep? And they say, well, I got a 28. I said, I'm going to give you a 2.8 in self-discipline. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden they're sitting there in abject terror, because what they're afraid of is I have an excellent correlation between whatever they're going to say and some sort of data I've got in front of me. Mm-hmm. And this is the terror of them getting their personal narrative to the truth. So this is what's critical. We've got to figure out a way with objective data to get them there. So they will agree that, yep, my self-discipline is a 2.8 because I didn't get it done in the summer. If I had worked harder in the summer, if I had the self-discipline to do everything you sent me in the summer, I would hit a 40, and clearly I didn't. Because I don't even have to ask them if they did everything that I asked in the summer. Of course they didn't. If they did, all of them would have had at least a 4.0 in the beat. So anyway, that's the beginning of the process to help get their personal narratives to the truth as fast as possible. Then, of course, we go through the other things. And this is the R part of the grow mnemonic. This is the reality part. We're checking their reality. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones telling me where they should be. And then, of
Hmm.
course, it's a conversation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, some kids have the reality that say, like, you know what, I came in and I thought I was a four, like I was a, or maybe a 3.5, right? I was a starter level at Carolina. And now I'm here for a week and I realize that I am not here yet, right? Which is great. That's reality, right? But that acceptance of it. Jerry, I know you wanted to kind of wrap up part one of
Yeah,
this
you
with
know what?
a question.
And I have a way to segue here. I think what we need to do is maybe we need to do a part one and a part two with this. The conversation is obviously not over right now, but our time is up. And I think one thing we must start to think about, Anson, is, you know, is it right that we as a coach ask these kids if if we're going to ask this of these kids to become self-aware if we as coaches are not? And I think I really believe that these kids are smart. They pick up on that. They realize, well, my coach isn't doing that, or my coach isn't that self-aware. So I guess I want to leave it with this question. Is there a way that we can help coaches? Is there a way that we can suggest to other people, this is how you can become more self-aware? This is how you can project what you're asking from them. Well, I mean, I can't ask people to run laps if I'm not going to run laps with them, you know? And so how about we leave it at that? Or do we have any comments to make about that?
No, Jerry, I'm with you 100%. I think that'd be a great spot to launch part two from, because I think you're going in the right direction. I think it's like the old cliche. If you want to have the credibility to lead the fitness session, you better be fit as a
Yeah,
player.
yeah,
Basically, you are spot on.
yeah.
So let's
And
start.
that's what John and I want to do in this certification process is we want to help people to take the deep dive, help them become more self-aware, which I still think is the number one uh, the number one important area of coaching development these days is not if you know the X's and O's, is if you know who you are, and then we go from there, and we'll see what happens. So yeah, that let's use that as a launch, John, and we'll go from there.
Coach, thanks so much for being on and good luck in the NCAA tournament. And we will follow up. We'll get part two recorded at the end of this season.
I appreciate it. And John and Jerry, so much fun.
Yeah,
I
it is. Whew.
That was pretty good, sir. I mean,
Uh,
amazing, amazing stuff. Just, for our listeners, as we were recording this, we realized we were almost out of time and hadn't even scratched the surface. So we made the call in the middle. We hit pause in the middle of this podcast and said, and asked, Anson if he could. Well, actually, he suggested that we should come back and do a part two because this helps him become a better coach and he loves these type of conversations and we didn't want to cut this discussion short, so we've
yeah.
only cut it short for today. But man, we were just getting into some really good stuff. I mean, what's your big takeaway so far, Jerry?
Well, just picking up on that last point, when he said to us, and you know, th this idea that let's do this again. This is off the record here, but he said, you think I'm doing you a favor? He said, you're doing me a favor. You're helping me to explore myself and my passion and my journey and what I'm doing to become more self-aware. But one of the things that really, besides that, that really jump off the page is when he said to us, that idea of you can't teach leadership. And I'm here like, "God, yes, you can. Yes, you
Uh,
can. We're doing it all the time, right?" And then he went to this situation with this teacher, and he came away realizing, yes, you can teach leadership,
mhm.
and it takes courage, and it takes courage to fail, and it takes courage to be vulnerable, and you can teach that. It can be learned. We're not born leaders. There's no such thing as a born leader. I wasn't born a leader, John. You weren't born a leader. We learned it from someplace, and whether
Yeah.
it was our dads or other role models.
And his discussion of it, of like, which we didn't unpack and maybe we can unpack in part two, is it's also different in a team of women than men, right? Like just that
Absolutely.
confidence and the courage, dare to lead, Brene Brown, you have to have the courage to step up and lead versus, where, you know, societally that might come more to boys who have been told their whole life to be a leader, to step up, to have your voice heard. And I think that is a very important thing to maybe unpack in part two
Yeah.
is is
Yeah.
is that is that difference. And it was making me think of the podcast that we did, I don't know, sometime here in 2024 with Maureen Monty on her new book, um, about, women in sports and her work in Strengths Finder, where almost every boy, a huge percentage of boys have the word confidence come up as a strength, and like 1 out of 20 girls will have that. And I think that's a really important thing for us to unpack in part two as well.
Yeah, and of course the confidence piece, it's an illusion because the confidence that the boys say they have is really based on sand.
Hmm.
And I think the female population has a better handle on that, and they're not willing to say they're confident because they really realize what it takes to be confident. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So I'd explore that part as well. But that word from Brene Brown, dare to lead, I thought that was a brilliant title too. And that word dare is really, why do you have to dare to do something? Because it takes courage.
yeah,
And courage is, the French word coeur or the Spanish word corazon, which means heart. And it means coming from your heart, not your head, not being afraid, but coming from love.
yeah,
And that's what great leadership is all about. And as Phil Jackson said, without love, we wouldn't have had any of those championships, right? And
yeah.
John Wooden saying, I had a lot of love in my coaching. So it all comes together. And
Hmm.
he's an iconic coach in retirement, looking back on his career and sharing his wisdom with us. And we're going to continue.
Well, and I mean, because we always do sort of takeaways from part one, and that's one of them. And the other one is, when he talks about like what were the principles of a successful organization for him was his competitive culture and his core values, which we talk about a lot. But then I think get everyone's personal narrative to the truth,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
the other thing, everyone's personality is laced with excuses.
right.
And that's now a societal thing. So these are the kids that we're coaching.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah,
like I had said to him there, right? Like this is
yeah,
what we should talk about. When I'm
yeah,
having these postseason conversations with college coaches about their individual player meetings, a lot of them come around to the idea that these players never got to the truth of where they were on this team or where they had to get to. And so something objective like the last thing Anson talked about, which is rate yourself in these areas
yeah,
that will
yeah,
lead to success, right?
hmm
And then number two, right, become a truth teller and
yeah,
and get their personal narrative to a place where it's not. Because when you're coaching college and you only have 2 or 3 kids on your 26-person roster that aren't at that place, you're going to
hmm
be really good. But when
hmm
you have 12 or
hmm
16,
hmm
you're in big trouble.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good
So
point.
I love
Wonderful.
this.
Yeah. I
Love
do
this.
too. Yeah. Well, I'm excited and we'll schedule a part two, give them time to think a little bit more about this. And in the meanwhile,
Yeah. Onwards and upwards. In
yeah,
the meanwhile, everyone, right? I know we have a lot of people finishing your seasons. If you're a fall sport person right now, or you're in an NCAA tournament or a high school, state championship. And for those of you who are just, starting your season, moving into a basketball or a winter sport, ice hockey or something like that. What a great time to have a little
amazing.
truth telling session as well.
Yeah.
So go out there.
Everybody needs a truth teller,
Everyone
right?
needs a truth teller, and that might be one of the most positive ways you can use your influence. So go out there and use it
Oh
for good.
boy, I was wondering how you're going to slip that one in there, John. Beautiful. That was brilliant.
It's not neutral, and certainly Anson's influence on Jerry and I today was not neutral, and hopefully ours wasn't neutral on him either. So
Yeah,
thanks
absolutely.
everyone for listening, and we'll see you again next week.